Yeah.
So
I saw her last.
I saw her, but it was dark in here, and I just kind
Yeah,
of quick asked you
well,
something.
after you left, I came and
Mhm.
saw Stephanie, and she was kind of quiet.
Yeah, and so she sent me something that night or the next night about my Amazon cart, and she said, okay, it's all good. And I said, hey, I meant to ask you how your mom's doing, and she was like, my mom passed away.
Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. If all of my panelists could make sure that they're
she'll be in and out.
Okay.
unmuted.
Yeah, I gotta get something out to the staff about that. Yeah.
Are you ready, Mr. Bates?
You gonna go visit the barber tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay, we are all ready. Okay. Welcome to our webinar, Parenting During the Pandemic. I'm Lisa Kelly and I coordinate mental health services for Gahanna. I have the privilege of working with and supervising our fabulous mental health team, which includes our school counselors and our mental health specialists. So we are going to start by just introducing the panel. And I'm going to start with Mrs. Haringa. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Heather Haringa. I am the school counselor at Jefferson Elementary. I've been working with the district for about 15 years and I'm happy to be here with you today.
Mr. Rediger.
Yeah, my name is Nick Rediger and I'm the mental health specialist for the elementary level at Gahanna. So I work in all the buildings and I'm just happy to be here and help, offer some support to our parents.
Mrs. Ryan. I think we might have lost her. Let's go to Miss Marshall.
Hi everyone, Jenny Marshall here. I'm the school counselor over at Lincoln Elementary and I'm happy to be joining you today.
Miss Diol.
Hi, I'm Jen Diol. I am the school counselor at High Point. I'm also really happy to be here today.
Mrs. Jenkins.
Hi, I'm Dawn Jenkins. I'm the school counselor at Blacklick Elementary and happy to be here.
Mrs. Baker. I'm not sure if she's with us quite yet. Okay, Mr. Bates, are you there?
I am.
Okay, do you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Tom Bates and I am the principal at Chapel Field Elementary.
All right, and then we have Mrs. Baker here with us also, who is the school counselor at Royal Manor. And then Mrs. Ryan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm sorry about that. My internet was going out. I'm Mrs. Ryan and I'm the school counselor at Chapel Field.
Okay, great. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start the presentation. If you're watching this live on YouTube, there's a chat area that you can post questions there. At the end of the presentation, the panelists will take your questions and we'll also answer some of the questions from your registration forms. So I'm going to turn it over to our speakers. So everyone should be muting your camera and your mic. So there should be like no names on the screen. We're just going to share the screen with the presentation. I think we might be having technical difficulties. Who is trying to share their screen? Heather, are you having it? Okay, there it goes. There we go.
Can you see my screen yet?
Yes, your screen's on there. You just need to present. Yep.
All right. Sorry, guys.
Okay, you're good to go, Heather. Everything's up.
Okay. I'm going to let the team start. Go ahead, guys.
So we are calling our presentation Take 5, 5 Ways to Support Learning, Mental Health, and You.
We have 5 goals for today. First, we're going to focus on 5 ways we can support your student, how to support them and their mental health and emotional needs during this time. 5 ways to support their learning, and how you can do that during this time, as you start thinking about transitioning into the summer and what that's going to look like. And then maybe some things to consider as we are unaware or don't know yet what's going to happen in the fall. And then lastly, but not least important, 5 ways that you need to make sure that you are also supporting your own mental health and wellness.
So the first part that we're going to talk about today is just 5 ways to support your child's mental health. We're going to go through 5 tips for you. 1 is checking yourself. 2, listening and respecting your child's feelings. 3, taking time to read together. 4, adjusting expectations. And 5, teaching your child to listen to their body. So the first way that we want to talk about today to support your child's mental health is actually starts with you and checking yourself. Research has shown that being mindful of your tone and mental health state when interacting with your child is very important. So it's really important that when you're interacting with your student or your child to remain calm. It can be really hard, and we're in really trying times where everyone's feeling a lot of stress about being together all the time and stress of fulfilling expectations. But it's really important to help regulate your child's emotion, that you be as calm as you can. If you aren't calm, if it's possible, try to tag out or walk away. It's okay to give yourself some time before you address your child if you're feeling frustrated or not in the right mindset. You can always come back and talk when you're ready. Okay. The next tip is just to listen and respect feelings. Our children today in this time are really going through a whole range of emotions, and it's really important to validate and listen to your child's feelings. One thing you might want to avoid are phrases like "don't worry." Sometimes that can make a child feel like their feelings aren't important. So instead, you could try phrases like, "I hear that you're scared," or "I hear that you're worried." Everyone gets scared sometimes, and give them a chance to kind of explain their feelings to you so they can feel like they're being heard. The next tip I have for helping your child's mental health is actually reading together. And it might sound like an academic support, but it's really more than that. It's so important to take time to connect with your child at this time. It really helps to keep them resilient and emotionally healthy. Reading is just a simple activity that you can do to support each other and support their development. And it's a way to bond with each other. You can get creative with your reading. You could make a fort. You could pile up all the pillows from your couch onto the floor and just make a huge pillow pile or a pillow pit. Or you could read somewhere unique, like under a table. And it doesn't have to be reading either. I know that everyone doesn't enjoy reading all the time, but it's really important to do something together each day, whether that be a puzzle, watching movies, playing video games, even with your child, might be a good way, as long as you're connecting with each other. And I also think it's really important during this time to connect virtually with family members or friends. However, it is possible for you to do that, whether that's through a Google Meet or FaceTime. There's lots of ways to try to connect, even if it's just a simple phone call. And sometimes even letter writing can be a good thing to do together as well. Another tip is just adjusting expectations. Right now, there's a lot going on, and we start out with the best intentions, and sometimes those just don't work out all the time. So it's important that you just take time to adjust and adapt. Sometimes we have to throw a plan completely out the window and just be flexible and go with it. It's almost like Ohio weather. You never know what you're going to get each day. And it's really important that you recognize there are going to be good and bad days for everyone. And you might not be having good and bad days at the right time or at the same time. And that's okay. So just know that those easy days are going to come, those hard days are going to come. And it's just really important to be able to adjust and just taking some time to give yourself credit where credit's due, and just know that everything doesn't have to be picture perfect all the time. The last tip I want to share with you is just really teaching your child to listen to their body. Body cues can be so important when we're talking about mental health. When a child might be angry or scared, you could ask them questions like, where are you feeling that anger? Or where are you feeling being scared? Is it in your tummy? Is it in your chest? Is it in your head? Is it in your muscles? Just kind of taking some time for them to really be mindful of what's going on with their body. A simple way that you can do this is just asking them, let's act like we're smelling a flower, and then let's act like we're blowing out a candle. So it just helps kind of regulate breath and emotion, and it's really important that they can recenter themselves this way, and it'll be really valuable for them to get back into a well-regulated state. You want to do this and check in with them throughout the day, just to make sure that they're doing okay. And some days they might need a lot of checking in, and some days they might need just a little bit of checking in. So there's no right or wrong way to do it, but just taking the time to do it is so important.
All right, and I'm going to talk about 5 ways to support your child's learning opportunities. And I want to start this section by saying that I think it's really important to remember that the children's emotional well-being directly influences their learning. So kids who aren't emotionally regulated are going to have a much harder time remembering their past learning, retaining new learning, and communicating what they're learning. So not to mean that students at this time, even if they're stressed, that they can't learn, but that just using those strategies that Mr. Redinger talked about to help them just feel more emotionally regulated. So we're going to talk about taking breaks, digging deeper into the learning materials, using effort-based praise, relate learning to daily experiences, and creating a helpful learning environment. And I saw a lot of questions during the signups that had to do related to focus. And this is a topic that I'm going to address in all 5 of my tips. So first thing I want to emphasize, it's going to be normal for focus to look differently at home than it did maybe at school or other environments. Focus really depends on the age and developmental level, depends on the environment that they're in, and then their learning style. Some kids are more hands-on, some kids are more just able to sit down and watch a video. Some kids would rather be reading the material. So first, I'm going to start with it's important to break learning time into chunks. So natural stops. So think about maybe halfway through the story or, at the end of the book, depending on their age, ending, taking a break after a certain number of problems, halfway through a video. We want to think about the normal school day that children would have, that they would have breaks at regular times during the day, depending on their developmental level. So I think one of the best ways to support students being able to focus is including a lot of those breaks. So movement breaks. These would look like things like dance videos or calming videos. Go Noodle is a really great resource that I love to use with students that have movement breaks. You might think of movement breaks as maybe making them feel more energetic and less focused, but it actually helps meet those needs that children have developmentally to expel energy. You might also think about going on short walks, doing stretching, yoga, 5-minute fun dance off with also some cool down breathing exercises. What I like calling heavy work. So maybe having the child carry around some heavy books or involving them in some tasks around the house that might help them expel some of that extra energy. We also want to do maybe some gardening, breathing exercises, some quick fun games like I Spy or red light, green light. Those are some ways to just get that energy out. Next, set expectations for what learning time looks like. If you were to tell a first grader to focus, they might not know what exactly that means. So I think it's important to be direct and specific on what your expectations are as far as what focus looks like. So does focus mean that their eyes are on the screen? Does focus mean that, other devices are put away? Does focus look like knowing what to do when you need help? Does the child raise their hand? Do they come find you? Do they have a bell that maybe they can ring whenever they need help? Starting the day with less preferred tasks and ending it with the preferred tasks, the things they like to do more. So maybe starting the day with something that's a little bit more difficult for them, and then ending the day with that rewarding activity. And then monitoring their frustration level or having your child self-monitor their frustration. So, we've all been in situations where we've been working hard and just being stuck on a problem or an issue. As we feel more frustrated, it might be harder to focus. So in my next slide, I'm going to show you how to help them monitor their frustration. Actually, I'll go forward one more slide. One more, sorry. Okay, so this is a feeling scale that I use often with students just to help monitor their frustration level. And you could do this with just some simple paper, crayons. You could draw feeling faces. You could just write the numbers, whatever would be good for your child's age and knowing them. But, regularly checking in with them and saying, what are you feeling right now? And if they're at maybe a 4 or 5 or more, that's maybe a good time to take a break. So that's how we know when's a good time to take a break. And whenever they are, getting down to, or sorry, I have it opposite. So when they are in that high frustration, that 4 or less, then, you taking that break, and when they're calmer, going back to the material. You can teach them to monitor themselves, and they might say when they need a break. You might decide on your own what frustration level is a good time for them to take a break. And I'm going to go back a couple slides. So yes, this one. So when thinking about how often to take a break with your kid, this is a good handy guide to what the average attention span is for different ages. So just thinking about what would a break look like? How long should it last? For the younger age, maybe it's only a couple of minutes, and then going back to that work for another, about 10 minutes. And then next slide. So these are some more examples of movement breaks that you might consider doing with your child. Things like involving some exercises, just involving some fun little activities that they can do to be active and dispel some energy. All right, we're going to move to next tip. Okay, so the next one's about digging deeper into the material. So, maybe they are doing their reading, they're doing their work. Another way to help them focus is to help them retain that information a little longer. So we want to have them reflect on their learning. Maybe they can write a poem about what they just learned about. They could maybe write a journal entry about it. They could tell somebody about it. They might draw out what they learned. Maybe if you're reading a story, having them draw out their favorite scene from the book. It just helps them to take in that information a little more deeply. and then being able to retain that information. We saw some questions about that, also about how to retain information and be ready for next year. The next one is we retain information a lot better when we teach it. So having them become kind of the teacher on their material. So they learn the material and then they teach it to a sibling or a parent or grandparent. They might teach it to a family member over Zoom. And then asking meaningful open-ended questions. So an open-ended question would be something that can't be answered by a simple yes or no. So you might be asking questions like, what is the character feeling? What do you think will happen next? If you were them, what would you do? And that will just help them move beyond just the mechanics of reading to the reading comprehension that we also look at too as a child progresses through their schooling. And then finally, have the student rate their learning experience. If, you might say, well, how difficult do you think this is for you right now? How hard is it for you? And if they're rating themselves at like an 8 or 9, ask some questions about, well, what can we do to bring it down a little bit? So what supports can you give? What maybe resources you might give them to help bring that number down, or maybe taking more breaks. All right. Then the next tip, we're talking about using praise. So thinking about using praise to improve their motivation to do their work or to learn. So what I like to do with students is use frequent, specific praise for behaviors that I want to see more of. And when I say specific praise, I mean, instead of saying good job or nice work, which isn't bad in of itself, but you might say something more specific like, I noticed you tried different strategies to get that math problem. You were working hard. Or you might say something like, you've been sitting in your seat. Keep up the good work. So that gives them more information about what they're doing that we're liking. So it's actually digging into what does good job mean. And that helps them in the future to know what being focused looks like, what doing your work looks like. Praising, starting small. So keep in mind, it's going to take some time to see results, especially at the beginning. So you're going to start with giving them a lot of praise really quickly, praising small things, just the thing of like, you're sitting in your seat or your eyes are on the video. That's working really hard. So start with those small things and then moving up to, hey, you did 5 of your problems today. Focus on their effort over the finished product. So the finished product might not always be perfect, but just praising, what they did to get there. So instead of saying, you're so smart, try saying, I noticed you took notes while you listened to the video. That was a helpful idea. Or you keep working hard and getting better every day. Just again, more specific and telling them what they're doing right. You might also point out how their efforts has helped in the past. So you might say something like, maybe they're having a rough day. With the learning, you might say, well, I noticed on Tuesday when you turned off the tablet, you came up with a lot of creative ideas for your writing. So that might help give them some more information and push to continue trying that. But I would say with that, just be careful of your tone because depending on your tone, it could come off as criticism. And then just remember that your relationship with your child comes first before the learning. If children are able to have solid caring relationships, they are going to be more regulated and more able to hold on to their learning. All right, and now we're going to talk about continuing learning into the summer. So ways that you can build off of daily experiences to create some unique learning time for your students. So thinking about what your child is interested in and maybe developing some ideas on that. So they might do research into things that they're curious about. I've seen kids do research on Minecraft before, or doing research on their favorite animal. I'm doing things like journaling together, writing about their daily experiences. Just a couple fun family ideas is a poetry coffee house for the family, where everyone writes their poems and shares them as a family. Again, building in those writing skills in a fun, creative way where they might not even realize that they're learning. A family book club, and then setting up experiences that you do every day as a family, but bringing in different subjects with them. So maybe If you're cooking together, it's not really explicit teaching, but you're teaching them different things like how to read a recipe. You're teaching them how to measure. You're teaching them math. You're teaching them how to follow directions and manage their time. You can see a few more things on here, but just ways to get them writing, reading, and making good decisions. And then the last one is creating a helpful learning environment. So if possible, just create a space for learning that may be different from where they watch TV or where they, might be different, maybe not working in their bedroom because that's where they associate with sleep and with play. I know for some people this isn't possible, but even if you can set up a curtain or a way that they can have their own space for learning. Keeping an organized, minimal desk space or table space that they can work at with all their materials ready. So think about things like paper, pencils, things like that they might need, calculators, reference books, what online resources that they need. You might make sure they have them bookmarked on their computer or pulled up when it's time to learn. Making a checklist together of what they need to do for that day, and then check in with them for their work completion and that they're submitting it. I've heard online of some stories where teachers have gone in to see the student turned in an assignment, but it was actually just a blank document. So just making sure that the work is being completed and it's being submitted. So you can have your child walk you through what that means to do the assignment and submit it, so that you know that they're doing it and they know that you know what's the proper way to do it.
All right, so for this section, I added a little bonus in here because we wanted to be very aware that we are getting to the point where schools are starting to wrap up their learning. We're starting to have some fun days for the kids, and with summer coming and just the kids getting ready to have that end of the school year, we wanted to think about helping families think about how to be proactive in creating the closure that the kids need to get at the end of the school year. Normal end of the school year often brings up many emotions. For those of you who have kids already, you can probably remember past years where they might come home teary-eyed the last day of school, and sometimes that even lasts for a couple days afterwards. That might be a little bit more magnified for some of our kids this year, just because there's just so many pieces that are missing. They already had their last day of in school and they didn't even know that they had it. So there might be some feelings that are in there that they're not quite able to express, and that might kind of come out as they are realizing that the school year is wrapping up. I think especially 2 of our 5th graders who know that they're not then coming back to the elementary school. Depending on the developmental stage of your child, they may or may not be able to tell you about their emotions. So pay attention to those things. If you're noticing your kid in the next week or so, as the year is wrapping up, if they're having more times like frequent crying, maybe anger outbursts, things like that, that might be their way of showing that they have some emotions that they're not yet talking about. And when that happens, we want to provide the opportunity for them to process it. A lot of times you might think, well, if we talk about it, it's just going to intensify it. I'm going to distract them instead. But what we want to do is give them the space to safely process the emotions that they're having. So the ways you can do that is asking them, what are some of the favorite things from the school year that they're going to miss? What are some of the things that they might be looking forward to for next year? But we don't want to shut down that time for them to work through that, because that's what will get them to the other side and be able to start looking forward to other things. With that same way, it might be a little tricky for kids to understand that they're moving into summer. And so if you're able to provide an activity that can really concretely help kids recognize that summer is started and school is over, that could be helpful. It could just be something like getting out water balloons, playing in the sprinkler, having their favorite meal outside, anything that kind of introduces summer and, lets them know school is officially done now. And one more thing you can do to help yourself and them have things for the summer to look forward to is thinking about just different activities that they might be able to do. It does not need to be anything complex or expensive. I'm thinking of small things like a movie marathon, maybe a new bike path you're going to take, or a new recipe, any of those things. And if you start getting those on the calendar or make a bucket list for the summer, those could be some things that will help them move past the school year and know that it's over and look forward to the things that are coming up this summer.
Okay, next we wanted to talk about 5 ways to support your own mental health. We wanted to make sure to add these tips in, kind of similar to the image that's at the bottom of this slide here, the airplane analogy. If you really have to have your own mask on before you can help put someone else's mask on. So when we talk about serving elementary school kids mental health, we really talk about serving adult mental health as well. These 5 tips are listed here, and they're to take care of your own mental or your own physical health, to know your limits and take a time out, to seek connection with family and friends, to seek professional counseling, and utilize online resources. The first tip, taking care of your physical health. We know that research links physical health and mental health. So thinking about ways during this time that you can do small, realistic things to take care of your physical health, such as taking a daily walk or a bike ride, just spending some time outside, especially during the summer, having your sun on you, we know boosts endorphins, limiting your alcohol and caffeine consumption, and drinking water. We know that we're all home right now, working from home, working with our kids, and that it's important here to be realistic and celebrate your small wins. So just adding an extra glass of water in, adding an extra walk, knowing that that will help out. The next tip, knowing your limits and taking a time out. I believe it was Nick kind of covered this tip as well when he was talking about student mental health. So similar to children, we need to take breaks and we need to know that it's okay to step away to self-regulate. Something that most elementary schools have encompassed this year is having calm corners or safe spaces. So thinking about having a space in your house where students or adults can go to take a break, to be able to co-regulate and then come back when you're not feeling those strong emotions. We talk to our kids about this all the time, but knowing for ourselves that co-regulation is really key to being able to manage your own mental health.
And Molly and I talked about this in the way too, that when we do this and our children see us do this, we are showing a good role model for that. Sometimes parents put a lot of pressure on themselves to, always kind of have it together in front of their children. And it's okay if you need to say to them, I need to walk away or I need a break right now, because it's showing them, that you expect that of yourself and not just of them.
Our third tip for adults is seeking connection with your family and friends. So we're social. We know that our brains seek safety and connection in order to think clearly. And just as with your children having that connection and that time to connect with you, it's important for you to prioritize connecting with your social network when possible. Again, we know that's really tricky right now because we're home with our families and we have extra responsibilities, but thinking when you can add in those times for connection. So maybe while you're cooking dinner, being on a call with a friend, FaceTiming while you're doing one of those family walks, or taking a minute to send a handwritten note to someone. It's really important that we remain connected, and it's just as important to us as it is to our children. Our fourth tip is seeking professional counseling. So clinicians are here to help. Many of them have adapted their own practices to telehealth sessions. During this time especially, we know that adult mental health has been on the minds of many clinicians. So reaching out to your primary care physician for an in-network referral, or although everyone on this call is a school counselor, we are happy to help you connect with a clinician. We have a list of clinicians here in Gahanna that you would need to call to work through your health insurance, but we're happy to help with that collaboration. And then our final tip is utilizing online resources. Something really positive that we've seen in the world of mental health and school counseling is the amount of resources that have opened up either for free online or have begun to transition to online resources for families to use. My favorite is CAP for Kids right now, has a huge resource list of all Columbus-based resources. They cover everything. If you click through that link, from food insecurity to mental health to fun things to do this summer with your kids that are safely socially distanced. The second link I have is the National Institute for Mental Health Resources. These are federal resources for mental health care. These would be helpful if you're on government insurance or if you're looking for any resources that we have the capability to access. And then I've listed a free workout and a free mindfulness link. Those both are apps that have opened up for free online that are great to use.
All right, and now we're going to open it up for any questions.
Okay, I'm going to ask the panelists to turn your cameras and your mics back on. And Heather, if you could stop sharing your screen. There you go. Perfect. So if everyone could have their cameras on, that would be great. Okay. So we don't have any questions quite yet from the YouTube channel. There is a delay. So we're going to just start with some of the questions from registration. This question came up more than once, and I'm going to ask Jen Diol to answer this one. Is regression of milestones normal during this time? So we've had parents say that kids are kind of backsliding with different milestones that they've already reached. They're playing with toys that they stopped playing with 2 years ago, just like much younger than what they're typically used to. So can you talk about if that's normal and how parents should handle that?
Yeah, I think that can be very normal for kids right now. This can be a traumatic experience for them, what we're going through, even though our kids are home and they are safe and they're with family. This has been a big disruption to their normal life. So we definitely might see them doing some things that make them feel safe and comfortable. And that's where you might see some of that regression. So I think it's okay if you notice that and allow your child to have that time. And then also, encourage them to also keep moving forward. Maybe you could, with your support, they could do some things that will help them grow as well.
All right, thank you. We have a YouTube chat question now, and I'm going to give this one to Dawn Jenkins. Dawn, the parent writes, my kids are really struggling with friends who are not social distancing. They see them all playing outside together, and even though they understand why we are choosing as a family to be safe, they are still jealous and sad. Understandably so, she says. My question is, how do we deal with this without vilifying those who aren't social distancing?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And I think that a lot of families are struggling with that right now. I think it's important to just continue to have those family conversations about the choices that you are making in your family and why you're making them, and keep those lines of communication open with your kids, and just validate those feelings. Like, it is hard, and I know it's hard for you to see them playing and their family is choosing something different, and that's disappointing and hard. So just validate those feelings and continue to have the conversations. And also, if you are able to put together some family time and do some of the things that we suggested earlier, to help your kid kind of connect within the family and within the boundaries that you've set, then that might help them as well.
Dawn, she added after I read you the question that they talk a lot about how each family is dealing with things in their own way, but she doesn't want her kids to start really judging others. So any tips for her on ways to help her kids not become judgmental of others who aren't doing what they're doing.
Well, yeah, I think that, probably the kids are going to take those cues from you. So as you're having those conversations, if you're not judging and you're trying to be really, diplomatic in your conversations with your kids and being careful how you say it, then they're going to take those cues from you. And just having those conversations about that, families are different, and maybe there are different reasons that we're not aware of why they're choosing different things right now. And it's okay. And just reminding them of that and being careful of your language. And also, like, if you're talking with a spouse later or talking with someone on the phone, they're always listening. So be sure that you are always being mindful of what you're saying, even if it's not a conversation directly with your child.
Yeah, that is true. They are always listening. My 4 kids remind me of that constantly. This next question is from our YouTube chat. I'm going to give this one to Heather. Heather, how do we prepare our children for the 2020-2021 school year? Since we're not sure if in-person classes will resume, parents are just wondering, what do we tell kids? How do we answer their questions and help them to feel okay about the unknown?
I think an important part for this is using the word let's to let them know we are all experiencing this. It's important. It can be easy for us to forget that everybody's going to be starting from a place of unknown, maybe feeling behind in different ways. And so using that word, those plural words as in let's and us, we are all feeling that way, that's common. Another thing is it reminds me a lot that this is a good time to talk to kids about staying in the present moment and being mindful of where we are right now. I know that even if I start thinking too far in advance, I start to experience quite a bit of anxiety and feeling very unsure. And so the best thing for ourselves and for our children, that when that naturally happens, we will naturally question and wonder those things, that we bring ourselves back to where we are now and remind ourselves that we are so lucky that we live in a district where we have so many great professionals and people who love and care about the students and the families and the staff, and that they're really working hard to make sure everything's going to be the best it can for us. And once we've acknowledged that, coming back to the moment and being mindful.
Those are great points. This next question I'm going to give to Mr. Bates. Mr. Bates, we've had a couple questions about just transitions. We didn't get to do our kindergarten roundup the way that typically schools do. We also didn't get to do our 5th grade exit like they typically do. The kids have missed the clap outs. And so the 5th graders also haven't been able to have a solid plan for transition to middle school either. So parents are just wondering how buildings are dealing with the transitions of the new students coming into buildings and the other students going into new buildings, like the older students.
Well, we've talked a lot about those things in our administrative meetings. And of course, a lot of things are still uncertain at this point. We're hoping to be able to hold some form of kindergarten roundup closer to the start of the school year. You mentioned end of the year things are probably more in mind. And I know each individual building is planning special events for their 5th grade. A couple buildings have already placed signs in the yards of 5th graders. We're planning some type of what we're calling here at Chapel Field, a virtual clap out next Friday, where the kids will come and drop off the materials they borrowed from school during distance learning, and we'll return things that they left at school. And you mentioned the transition from 5th grade to middle school. Probably the best thing to say is we're as concerned about those transitions as the parents are. There aren't any really solid answers yet, but I know as that time gets closer, we'll have good plans in place to make the kids feel as supported and as successful as possible.
Thank you for that. The next question is from parents who are struggling with children that are having bad dreams because they're scared and having anxiety, to a point that it's causing them to want to sleep with their parents every night because they're so scared. So let's have Miss Marshall. Do you have any suggestions for parents when their children are having bad dreams and needing to sleep with them at night?
Yeah, I would definitely say starting with looking at the nighttime routine. What does your nighttime routine look like? So start to ask those questions yourselves and think about ways that you can introduce calming activities into your nighttime routine. I know for myself, lavender lotion is something that's really helpful. Surrounding yourself with comfortable items, doing some reassurances together as a family. Maybe that looks like a nightly story. You might talk about, even as yourself, your experiences that I've had bad dreams too, and validate those feelings as like we've talked about. Those are really hard. And what I do when I have bad dreams is you might share what you do. I go get a glass of water. I ask myself some questions. Is this true? Is this realistic? Asking those questions and talking through that with them and help them with that process. But anything you can do to reassure them that this is normal and that it can get better.
Thank you. Any tips from anyone on the panel about how to help with getting the child back to their bed? So I can relate to this as a parent. It is really frustrating to have kids in your bed at night. And I see the parents on the panel shaking their heads. And I will add to what Miss Marshall said about having a relaxing bedtime routine. I will have my kids, my personal children, do guided meditations right before bed. There are some really excellent ones that you can find online where someone will talk in a great, really soft, relaxing voice to your child, and it helps them kind of drift off to sleep with something really positive in their mind. So I think that's a great idea. But going back to, let's say they've had the nightmare and now they're in your bed. What are some tips for helping with that? Who would like to answer that? I saw all of the parents nodding their head. Who would like to jump in on that one?
I'll say something really quickly. And again, this is personal experience. My kids are grown now, but we went through this in different stages and different times. But one of the things that was really helpful and again, it depends on what level of them being in your space you're comfortable with. There are some parents who are, okay with the kid being in the bed, and some parents who are completely against it, and everywhere in between. So if you're comfortable with setting up a space, like maybe on the floor close to your bed, where the kid can actually come and lay down on the floor and get some sort of comfort out of that, as opposed to getting in your bed, that could be a step down. And then you can kind of work your way back from there. That's something that has worked for different parents.
Anyone else want to add anything to that? Go ahead.
Something else that might work is during the day when they're calm and in a good space, talking to them about, okay, let's have a plan in case you have a bad dream tonight. Some things that they maybe could do alone. One thing that I tell my kids to do is, if you wake up and you've had a bad dream, I want you to think about something that makes you really happy for a few minutes, and really picture something in your mind, like maybe a vacation we went on, or the bike ride to the park that we went on that was really fun. Like, really relive what that experience was like for you. But then I also will say, if you need to come and see me, this is what it will look like. I'm going to give you a hug. I'm going to talk to you for a couple minutes, but after 5 or 10 minutes, I am going to bring you back to your bed and tuck you in, and you're going to go back to sleep. So talking beforehand about what it will look like if they do come in.
I think that's a great idea. Go ahead, Heather.
I was going to say a lot of that. And the one thing, it's not about getting them back in bed, but thinking ahead of time and having conversation, just as we said, that kids are always listening. And so really being mindful about what are the conversations you're having in front of your kids about what is currently going on. Sometimes I know here the TV would be left on, or the radio could be left on. And so maybe they're picking up on news or stories. Also, because kids are online so much, they could be seeing a lot of different things, and a lot of things they see online may not be true. I try to relate to my children when they're in this way, that like if there's a scary movie that they want to watch, I'll say, I remember how much I used to like to do that until I realized how often it was giving me nightmares. So now I decide most of the times when there's scary shows or scary movies, I don't watch them because I know I'm going to get a nightmare. So maybe just trying to see if there is a connection of something that they're being exposed to that might be kind of bringing that up for them.
Another question that we got multiple times on pre-registration was about children who are the only child. So Nick, I'm going to give you this one. Parents are exhausted from being their only playmate. So what suggestions could we give parents on ways to help their only children be able to connect with other kids, play in a safe way, and then also just keep themselves occupied so that they're not constantly tapping into their parents when their parents are drained?
Yeah. Well, I think first off, it's really important to cut yourself some slack and maybe relax some rules that you might have had before. Sometimes it's okay to maybe just let your kid veg out so you can have some time. So I think it's okay for you to, say, I'm going to put this movie on for you. That is your favorite, because it's really important that you're taking breaks, especially if you're starting to get burnout. And there seems to be lots and lots of new ways emerging every week for kids to connect with their friends, whether that be, I know there's like a Facebook Messenger for kids, there's FaceTime. So taking those opportunities, if you can, for them to connect with friends that they aren't seeing in person are so important. Just so they can kind of start to have those routines and get back into maintaining those relationships as well. Those are important. So, but it is hard when you are their only outlet. So maybe talking about, having special toys that they have that they play with themselves, or maybe like putting some things in a box that they could use that is for their alone time only. So that way it makes it special and it gives them something to look forward to when you say, all right, I need you to go have some alone time.
And I think too, we talked a little bit about this, and Nick, you referenced it. I think there's been a lot of, I think parents are really hard on themselves right now. And one thing that I think that you should allow yourself is to understand that having an increased screen time right now is okay. So we're not talking about, have your child be on their video games all day, every day. We definitely want to have a balance and say, you need to get outside and do this, or we want to make sure that the screen time is meaningful. But even myself, I'm very, 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 very strict with my 5th grader on how much screen time he gets. And I've relaxed it because I hear him talking to his friends. And so I think that is really just valuable for the kids. In line with that, only child question is, I have a lot of echo. I'm not sure why I'm echoing. Okay. So from the YouTube chat, my only child, who is a boy, is isolating more and more. He sometimes isolates from us alone in his room, and he never did this before. He has had no contact with kids his age for the past 2 months. What strategies or suggestions would we have for an older student who's pulling away? Who would like to take this one? Jen, Diol, would you like to take this one?
Yeah. So I think it's having that conversation and telling your child, like, I'm worried because you don't seem to be talking as much with your friends. Can we kind of talk about how you're feeling and why, you haven't been in as much contact with them, and finding out kind of what that barrier might be, whether it's they're not comfortable, they don't feel like they are fitting in right now, whatever it might be. Just kind of hearing from them about how they're feeling at the time. I think that this is really hard. I have kids that range in age from elementary school through high school. And I do think that with the different personalities of my kids, I'm finding that it's really tough for some more than others. And I'm just trying to stick to our family routine and, family dinners and things like that to make sure that we're still having that time together where we can talk and really support each other. And, now that we can get out a little bit more, I've asked my kids, our summer is going to look a lot different, but what are some things that we can do that would help you have good days. And so one of them I just shared with the counseling team was kayaking. My son, who's older, said, I'd really love to learn how to kayak. And so we were going to buy kayaks and try that out this summer. So, you know, just trying to give them some things to look forward to and to give them that hope. And, you know, just to keep reminding them that it will go back to normal. It's not going to be like this forever. I think that sometimes our kids don't see that it will change. That, you know, I think that it's easy to get in the mindset of this is just how it is. There's no hope, but we will get back to normal. We will still have friends and can have a sense of normalcy.
Lisa,
Molly,
if I could add on to that.
yeah, go ahead. I saw your wheels turning, so go ahead.
Yes, I was going to add on to what Jen said, that in having that conversation and affirming with your student their feelings, really linking the behavior to the feeling. A lot of the time when I work with students, they don't always see that maybe the withdraw is actually a part of them feeling sad. That those behaviors, maybe they think they're feeling really sleepy and they just want to be in their bed more, and that might be how their body is processing those feelings of sadness. They're really helping them link that, and that kind of goes back to the tip Nick gave us to help them hear their body cues. So if that's happening, if you're feeling more sad, or maybe I've had a few students who have been a little bit more aggressive at home, right? Have been like ripping things or destroying things, like helping to link that. Oh, I see you're doing this. Do you think maybe you're feeling angry? Are you feeling sad about what's happening? Just that link and that body cue can make a huge difference for an elementary school student. They're learning themselves that way.
Dawn, go ahead.
I don't know if this is relevant in this situation or not. The person didn't really mention whether they felt like their child was withdrawing and maybe playing video games or not, but just reminding parents that sometimes kids are connecting on those video games. And we talked earlier about, you know, allowing a little bit more of that, and just remembering that a lot of the boys who play video games, and girls too, but a lot more of the boys, that's how they connect, and their social connection is really happening a lot on those video games right now. So he may be more connected socially than the parent thinks, if that is happening.
And I would add too, as it's getting warmer, I know parents are coming up with creative ways for their kids to socially distance, but still physically see a friend. So like yesterday, for example, my son and two other neighborhood boys had a socially distant water gun fight, and they all had their area. They weren't allowed to cross. They all wore masks. They all had their own squirt guns. And it really, like, my son's 10 also, and he's kind of done the, like, I'm just going to stay in my room because I've got nothing else to do stuff too. And it just really revived him. When he got home, he was like, that was so fun. And he literally didn't touch anybody. I mean, he was like 12 feet away from all of them, but just being able to see them. So I do think that as it gets warmer, and again, depending upon the comfort level of your family, everyone has to make their own choices. So I'm certainly not saying that this is the right answer for everybody, but if that's something you're comfortable with, maybe getting with some other moms and coming up with a social distant like way for them to see each other might be something that you can think of too. And then I would also add, if you're really worried about your son really pulling away and isolating, we did talk about counseling for adults, and there are definitely counselors out there for kids who can help them through this time and do what's called telehealth. So similar to just a Zoom meeting, and I know it's not ideal either, but that can also be really helpful and can help you have another outlet for your son, so that maybe he has someone else to talk to, and then that person can give you some tips on some things that he's thinking or feeling that maybe he's not sharing. So we do have linked in our page that we included in the links. We have a list of local counselors there that you can tap into. Okay, I'm just looking. The next question is, how long will our school counselors be available? So do one of you want to talk about your summer schedules?
I'll go ahead and talk about it because I just had this conversation yesterday with one of my students as they were starting to realize that we were getting to the end, and asking if we could continue to talk. And so explaining that while I would love to do that, that's just not something that my job allows for. And so we are going to meet one more time. We, as all the educators in the building, will be checking email and everything all the way through the end of May. But after that, while we still check email and that sort of thing sporadically, we don't ever want kids to have, you know, any confusion about the fact that like they could be reaching out to us during the summer, and if they're not hearing back from us, that would be troublesome. So if you do think that your child needs that continued support throughout the summer, reach out to the school counselor now. You could talk about maybe some ways of putting closure to those last sessions maybe that they're doing online. And if you think that they need that continued support over summer, your school counselor can help connect you with somebody so they can continue to have that through the summer.
Okay, I'm just making sure that we don't have any last minute YouTube questions, and we don't. One of the questions from registration though was if we could provide a list of activities and different things parents could tap into during the summer. So I do want to make sure parents know that all of your school counselors either have a Google website or a Google Classroom that will have tons of activities that you can look at. We also, and I'll link, and maybe we can link in our sites to the page that has the link to the presentation in it as well. That might be helpful for parents. We also have virtual, what we call our virtual smart lab. It is just millions, almost it feels like, of activities for kids to do, physical, creative, you name it, it's on there. So if that's something that you would want to look at, we can link that into our page as well with the recording of this. So we thank you all for attending. And if you do have additional questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to your building school counselors or your mental health specialist. Thank you and have a nice night.